Hello everyone, this is Ramirez with Todd Renaissance Fighting Arts, and today we're going to talk about Rondel Daggers and which kinds of Rondel Daggers would be right for you and why. I'm not going to do this, not necessarily a review video, but if there is a particular Rondel you see me handling, you're like, hey, I'd like to know more about that, could you do a review video? Please leave a link in the comments below and I can certainly do one. So let's talk about Rondel Daggers, certainly in HEMA. Um, Very popular, for people wanting to do dagger fighting, or sometimes if you lose a weapon that you have that dagger there as a secondary weapon. Not as popular a thing, let's say, in competition, but certainly if you're doing your own sparring in your club, you may find that having that dagger there for certain situations is useful. In my club, for example, I do help train people with poleaxe, and we use the descendant leather ones for our regular HEMA practices, so we can actually spar with them. And there have been several times where I've gotten up to someone, grabbed their poleaxe, and then I'll grab my dagger and stab them because it's generally a lot easier once you reach wrestling range to go ahead and resort to your dagger. And rondels being the predominant ones that are utilized in the manuals. I do hope to, in the next few weeks, do a comprehensive um, medieval and Renaissance dagger video, but that'll have to wait because I am waiting on a special entry into that video. So let's talk about rondels. Most people who do HEMA and have a rondel will have this. This is the Cold Steel Rondel Trainer. You might notice, hey, yours looks a little different. Looks a little bit cooler than the one I have. Um, this is a normal one. You don't order it special like this. I had some gold acrylic paint that I just painted this, but this is the standard Cold Steel Rondel. The nice thing is they're cheap. If you're paying more than $10 or $15, you're probably paying too much for these. And in terms of general HEMA equipment, it's stiff, but not, you can get some flex. And generally, when you touch or press someone, they'll know they got hit, and you can kind of visually see that. It has this huge kind of ball at the end of it, so it's definitely blunt enough that it's certainly not going to give you a whole lot more force than, let's say, getting thrust in the chest with a fetter, or anywhere else. So it's good for that. It's good if you are actually practicing a lot of the knife techniques. So, you come in, if someone wants to catch your wrist and you want to turn or grab, it's really kind of good for that. And it's really good because it's safe. And I think that for me, safety is a high issue. I like it. The downside is they don't come with sheaths. There is a wonderful company, I want to say it's Thistle Dew Creations on Etsy, that makes scabbards for these. Um, I make I do my own leather work, so I just made this scabbard. So once again, it doesn't come with this. This is just something I put together with a relatively simple pattern. You just take the thong at the end, you tie it around your belt, and you're pretty much good to go. The draw is fairly quick and easy, as well as putting it back. But this is something that I made. If you're particularly handy with leather, it's not a hard thing to build on your own. But do know that the cold steel rubber trainer does not come with any type of dagger. But I think this one is very good for general HEMA practice if you're interested in doing dagger in and of itself, like learning dagger techniques, historical dagger techniques, or you want an additional sidearm when you're fighting with longsword, or certainly pull weapons, because a lot of times with pull weapons, when you get close, it's easier to just grab your opponent's weapon, or in other words, immobilize that weapon, then grab your dagger and just stab them because you're that close. Next up, I have one from Darkwood Armory. And this one is for for harness fighting, armored fighting. Um, I wouldn't recommend this for and it does have some flex. You can kind of see that. But if I jam it, you're not gonna. You're gonna really feel that in a way that the other trainer doesn't. This definitely hits harder. Also, in terms of a lot of the historical techniques, because it does have a little bit of flex, I wouldn't want to grab and then have someone like put pressure on it this way, because you could really bend and put a permanent bend in this blade. It's really not meant for that. It's meant if you're doing armored fighting, jabbing under the hand in the gauntlet or trying to get in the neck or armpit. That's really what this is meant for. It's fairly solid. A couple of notes about Darkwood's Rondel Dagger. They make several different types, and if you tell Darkwood Armory what you want to use it for, they will kind of make it accordingly. I told them I wanted this specifically for harness fectin. Apparently, they do make some that are a little more flexible if you want to use it for regular blouse fectin and types of training, so that does have more flex. I think the trade-off there is because there are techniques where you grab this part and you're using it to leverage. I would always be worried about this because it's a fairly thin blade, that it would bend and put permanent bends in the blade. You're not going to really do that the same way with harness fectin, so it's a little bit just better for that. I would go to the cold steel for blouse fectin. I would trade up with this for when I'm wearing my armor. Some other notes: these do not come with a blunt for it, but the small blunts for rapier stuff go on the tip. I've taped mine on here, so that's not a problem, but you should be aware it doesn't come with the tip on there. This is kind of their basic economy model. They can make fancier hilts if your nightly purse is big enough and you want something fancier than this. I just needed one to start training with, so that's what I got. Also, this does not come with a sheath. I think that if you talk with Darkwood, they could make you one, but it's probably going to be an extra purchase. Once again, since I do my own leather work, I just made a leather scabbard for it. Goes in pretty easy, and once again, draws out pretty fast, so it hasn't really been a problem. Like the other one, it has a simple thong attached to it, and you just tie that to your belt, tie it back around here, and you're good to go. So that is the Darkwood Armory. Once again, this is really more for harness fectin. So you'll have that one, the cold steel, which, as I said, I use for mostly blouse fectin situations where people are not wearing armor. And then we go to kind of the stuff for reenactment. And I think that having rondels for reenactment purposes, as a HEMA person, you don't ever have to have that, but it gives you some insight into what real rondels were like. And that is a valuable insight. So the first one, this one comes from Todd Cutler. Good news is this does come with this scabbard. I will talk a little bit about the pros and cons of that in a moment. This one does have these little nubs, and everyone who looks at it says, does that make it painful to grip? And it really doesn't. They're there to actually help your grip. None of those studs are particularly pointy, but they do, and especially if you have a set of gloves on, they really do help with grip. The rondel is quite nice. It has this kind of flower design on the end of the bottom rondel. This is part of their economy line, so it's not the top end ones, but it still runs about, I think, somewhere between $120 and $150 US. I know I got it with a sale or discount, so I don't know what the final price actually would be, but that gives you an idea of the price range. It's a beautiful, beautiful blade. It's a very sharp point. It does have a little bit of a gap in the top rondel, so if I turn it, you kind of see the hole for the top rondel. It has a little bit of gapping in it. When it's sheathed, you're never going to see that, but if you do take it out, you will be kind of aware of it. I did ask for them to sharpen it up, and so it does have a little bit of an edge, not razor sharp, but still, that's not really the reason you have a rondel, is for the point, and the point is definitely quite pointy. Um, One downside is the hilt is significantly heavier than the rest of the blade, so when you're wearing it, it tends to want to turn down. One other problem with the sheath was it was very, 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 very loose. And true story, I was at Pennsic and I had this dagger and I was wearing it, and it went like this and fell straight out and went right through the ground cloth of my nice tent, and I had a hole in the bottom of my tent, which now I have to fix before next year. So I would say one of the downsides is it really doesn't stay in the scabbard very well. You'll notice now I'm not really holding it, it kind of slips out, but it's a little slower. I did add some additional leather in here to help tighten it up. Clearly I have to add more leather to it to tighten it up. But I would say that one downside is this is a very, very loose sheath. It is not a full scabbard, it's just leather. But otherwise, in terms of looks, this looks fantastic. It has the brass shape on it, but my big complaint is that it is a very, very loose scabbard. But hey, a lot of rondels I showed you don't have scabbards at all. And this does get a lot of conversation started when I do wear it, because people that aren't used to seeing Rondel daggers do tend to want to ask questions like, hey, is that a Rondel dagger? The other, not downside, because it is a historical piece, it's relatively a thin blade. And I say that it actually is thick. I'm going to say that in comparison to the last rondel I'm going to show. But once again, if you're wanting a historical piece to go with your kit, or you just really want to understand what did a rondel feel like, doing these types of stabs and grabbing hold of it and really getting a sense for what that action would be like, having a reel or a reproduction of a steel rondel, because I can guarantee you this feels different than this. Just from how you hold it, you can feel the lightness in this versus this. It's a little heavier towards the front, whereas this, if you wanted to think about accuracy and how precise you can be with an angle on a rondel, this gives you that feeling much better than this, I would say. So it's another thought if you're like, why should I ever own a live or a steel weapon where a synthetic is what I'm probably going to use in tournament or in sparring? Understanding how a actual steel, like a reproduction, because that's as close as probably most of us are going to get to an original, works and feels, I feel is a significant thing. You start to recognize, oh, look at how much that does protect my hand, especially if I have a gauntlet on. Look at how easily I can press on the rondel itself if I need to push to get through armor, to get through chainmail, to get through difficult parts of the body. That's kind of a very useful thing. So last up, I have one last rondel to show you. And this is my most recent. This is a Christmas gift, so I just got it. But this is the Cold Steel rondel. I really do like the scabbard, so it has a metal shape, has a leather center, which seems to be reinforced, and then it has another another metal top at the start of the scabbard. And once again, that scabbard, that leather covered part, there's something else in here structural. It's not just leather. But the real beauty is the rondel itself. This rondel has basically 3 edges. It's very heavy, it's very solid. I know most people, when it comes to cold steel, say stuff is overbuilt, and I suppose there's no exception, but man, that point because of that. You know this isn't bending anywhere. If someone does go to grab it, they may be able to still do it. This isn't razor sharp, but it does present another challenge when someone else is trying to grab this blade that you could pull it along and probably get a cut out of that. The rondels themselves are somewhat small, but well decorated. What I really like is it is a rosewood handle and it has these brass pins. And I'll be honest with you, I love that. I feel, having done armored combat, I feel more comfortable that if I wore this as a sidearm, that I could get through other people's armor with this. Maybe not the eye slots as much, probably not as far as with the Todd Cutler, but if I had an arm or something, I have no problem thinking this would open up chainmail. This would get into places on armor. This would push forward. This would open up stuff. So I got this one, as I said, recently. I think this goes for about 130. I don't know, or I don't remember because it was gift, but I had looked into it. And what would I expect of a nightly Rondel Dagger? This is it. I have seen some friends of mine, Kurt over at Holstreffer Labs, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, has done a video where he talks about real techniques and basically put a huge blunt and a block on the point. And he actually does techniques with this. And I understand why he would use something like this versus the Todd Cutler version, because this does have a lot of weight to it. And if Kurt's willing to put a certain level of safety in blocking actual steel live blades with this, that makes me very comfortable with that. This would do the job. So yes, I really do like this. This is the most recent in my collection. And once again, you may never need something like this for the sake of doing HEMA, but I think for understanding HEMA, something like this is very interesting. I also like to point out it has this really neat system to put it on a belt, where you kind of you have this cloth, this string here, you have a hook, you just untie it here, you put it between your belt, and it just kind of locks right in. I really like that. I'll try to bring it a little closer so you can see that securing method for the belt. It holds well. The scabbard, I'm not worried about this falling out. And as I said, I know the darkened blade might not be everyone's cup of tea, but man, this is a really nice Rondel Dagger. So there you go. A series of 4 Rondel Daggers. Why you might want to have a reproduction versus one that's for training. There are 2 examples of training Rondel Daggers. There aren't a whole lot out on the market, and that's why, as I said, probably everyone has seen the Cold Steel. And one of the things I will tell you about that Cold Steel is, don't be afraid to kind of paint up the ends and make that look pretty. Another reason is these are all over the place. Like my club probably has about 10 of them between different people. And how am I going to know which one's mine? Well, I never have a problem figuring out which one's mine because mine's the only one painted this way. So if you paint yours, and you can use, what I used was an acrylic pen, or acrylic marker, and you can go to town and you can be as creative as you want to. The only thing I recommend not doing, I've heard other people paint the blade, is this is the part's going to come in contact with other people's equipment. So I wouldn't want, have accidentally silver paint on someone's jacket or on their equipment. I'm gonna hit other people with this part, so I leave it plain. This, if any gold rubs off on my gloves, that's on me. So I'm perfectly good with painting the handle. And besides, when it's sheathed, that's all you're going to see anyway. And then this end, the business end, I leave plain so that if I'm going to hit somebody else, I'm not going to, I can injure them. I can not injure them, but I can at least injure their ego by hitting them and not injure their ego by repainting their gambesons and HEMA jackets. So that's it. If you do have other questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer them. And I will see you in the next video.